Welcome, everyone. We're right at 11:30, so let's get started. My name is Mary Eleanor Power, and I am the Director of Marketing and Communications with Dalhousie University's College of Continuing Education. Thanks very much for joining us. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that Dalhousie University is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq. We are all treaty people. Welcome to today's webinar, Meeting Today's Information Access and Privacy Challenges in Local Government. I'm delighted to introduce you to Bob Doherty. Bob brings a plethora of experience as a public servant, university professor, and consultant in the information access and privacy field. As Nova Scotia's first full-time IAP director, he provided policy advice, training, and IAP administration for over a decade. Bob has taught courses in information access and privacy for both Dalhousie and Mount St. Vincent University, and worked with the University of Alberta's IAP certificate program. He's worked with universities in the past and was a privacy advisor in the education sector to the Provincial Schools Plus program and the New Brunswick Integrated Service Delivery program. Also, as part of his work, he continues to provide general and sector-specific IAP training workshops across Nova Scotia. He holds an MSc in communications from Boston University and an LLB from Dalhousie University. And welcome, Bob. And I will say that if you have any questions throughout this half an hour, please feel free to include them in the chat, and I will politely interrupt Bob and we'll address your questions. And then we'll also leave a good amount of time at the end for questions as well. So now, Bob, over to you.
Thanks, Mary Eleanor. Welcome, everyone, and good morning. I suppose in Newfoundland, it would be good afternoon if there's anybody from Newfoundland on board there. So I'm Bob Doherty, the instructor for Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Foundations. It's a course on the relevance and importance of information access and privacy to accountable, transparent, and effective local government. So Mary Ellen has given you a little bit about me already, but just to kind of emphasize a little bit, I've been a consultant and I was with the provincial government for over 10 years as the Information Access and Privacy Director. And I've been for the last 13 years been a consultant and teacher here with the University of Alberta and with Mount St. Vincent University, and of course here in Halifax with Dalhousie. So I'm also a member of, sorry, just a second here. Didn't quite.
I think it's at your final slide there, Bob, if you want to go to the first slide there.
Okay,
somehow it got to your last slide. There we go.
Okay, but I'm just going to put it on slideshow.
But yeah, I think you just need to click on the first slide there.
There we go.
Oh, there we go. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm also a member, sorry about that, but I'm also a member of the International Association of Privacy Professionals, better known as IAPP. So the course is part of Dal's College of Continuing Education winter term offerings and begins January 4th, 2021. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the course over the next several minutes. And hopefully it will whet your appetite for learning more about information access and privacy and how they are important to local government. So first of all, the acronym for information access and privacy is IAP, IAP. And it's one I'm going to use frequently as I talk about the course. I'm also going to use the acronyms FOI, which stand for Freedom of Information, and ATI, which stands for Access to Information. But before we start, as Mary Ellen said, if you have any questions about the course, as I'm speaking, you can connect through the chat room, and I will try to deal with it right then when Mary Ellen lets me know that they're occurring. Also, if you do not have your video camera turned on, you can send her the email through the chat room, of course. I should also note that this Zoom session is being recorded and will be available on YouTube after the session. Mary Ellen will post the link for the video on YouTube. So with all these housekeeping matters taken care of, let's get to it. So why take this course? There are two very important reasons why it'll be helpful as you progress in your career. First, it will give you insights into how information access and privacy, not only one of the foundations of a democratic society, but also that foundation exists at every level of that society. Second, to be an effective leader and team player in your local government organization, you should know what the IAP rules are for confidential records that you have and for the personal information that you hold on your citizens. So let's talk about a few situations where you'll need to know the rules of the road, so to speak. So do you know the difference as a starter between personal information and property information? That's an issue that has come up from time to time in clients that I've dealt with, and where there are some doubts as to which is which. Or do you know what's a public record and what is not? Do you know when your municipal council can go into in-camera and closed-door sessions? That's an issue that comes up occasionally in a lot of municipalities in terms of what they're entitled to do in that area. And when they can't go into session. Do you know what the disclosure requirements are for the records that come out of those sessions or are used in them? Let's also talk about confidential business information records, about deals made between a private company and your local government. So let's say you negotiate a contract or a development agreement or a land purchase. You want to keep it under wraps for the time being as you have similar negotiations coming up in the future. You're afraid that if the details of those deals become public, that your hands will be tied when you have to negotiate similar types of deals in the future. How do you prepare the agreement or contract for the deal so it won't affect your future negotiations and still be compliant with the legislation? Well, maybe you already signed the contract and a reporter makes a freedom of information request for all the details of the deal. What do you say to your access to information or FOI coordinator about how to respond to these situations? And if you're not going to disclose any of those records, what your grounds are for refusal? Or maybe, for example, in your municipality or local government, there's been a sexual harassment complaint by an employee, or an audit discovers missing funds, and you're asked to investigate and provide the CAO with a report. Do you know how to write the report to be transparent and accountable without violating the privacy of witnesses who gave statements with the understanding that they would be confidential? Or maybe the complainant is frustrated and wants a copy of the report to why the alleged harasser did not seem to be punished. What do you do? What about privacy breaches like a hack of your IT system at 4:30 on Friday afternoon? And doesn't it always seem that that's when they happen, when nobody's around and you're holding the bag or holding the decision responsibility there? So what do you do to provide privacy protection for your system or your employees? Maybe you're keen on using what's today's buzzword of artificial intelligence algorithms to deliver better customer service to your citizens. What are the privacy ramifications of big data? And there's some circumstances that arise that just kind of emphasize by news reports what's happening and what can present problems to municipalities and local government. I'm just going to cite a situation here in Nova Scotia that was quite embarrassing to the local government, where their IT system was hacked. In fact, it was their Freedom of Information online access system that was hacked, and they just by somebody making an application and going in and finding all kinds of records with personal information on them. I'm just going to read you a little bit of what the quote was in Foils, which is a website that deals with all these disasters. The website was created to host the province's public records and was designed in such a way that every request and response had a nearly identical URL and placed no technical restrictions on the public's ability to access any of the requests. This meant that regular public records requests and individuals' requests to access government files about them, which included private information, were all stored together and available on the internet for anyone, including Google's web crawler, to access. Well, let's take, for example, the city of Seattle, a situation in the United States where someone was looking for metadata contained in emails from all city email addresses. And they gave a fee estimate for this under Freedom of Information request for $33 million. Well, they revised that. They decided they made a big mistake because it was probably one of the largest fee estimates ever given. And when it came back, they decided to only charge in batches $1.25, $1.25 per batch for the records as they came through. But you know what, at the end, rather than disclosing just the metadata for all those 32 million emails, Seattle had given the applicant, the FOI applicant, the first 256 characters of every email. And these snippets included password, credit card numbers, and other personally identifying information. And rather cause celeb in the city of Calgary, for those of you who might be in Alberta, is there was a municipal councillor who had spent $6,400 on travel to a national meeting, and an FOI request revealed that, and then there was a forensic audit as a result of it. So the requests for expenses are quite frequent, and they generally have to be complied with under Freedom of Information legislation as well. And finally, there was a municipality in Nova Scotia that I won't name specifically, where they asked for all records related to the exclusive right to market an aspect of their city. And they received a damning report that was public and posted on the website. And I'm sure in the long term created some issues that had to be cleaned up in the municipality. So that's just a few examples of what types of situations that can be involved. So while there are no ready-made answers to the questions that I pose for you, there's certainly some problem-solving approaches that use information gathered from the course and the experience in working through dashboard and essay assignments that will guide you in these situations. There are no right or wrong answers to these questions, but there are solid principles, legislation, and approaches that the course provides that will help you to respond to such situations effectively. You have a great opportunity with this course to get a solid understanding of and the familiarity with IAP principles and laws that are and will be important, not only to your own work in local government, but also to the success of your local government organization. As you may have gathered, I have a passion for the field, but probably more so for one in helping ensure that local governments get it right with their own IAP program. Information access and privacy is a hot topic affecting all our areas of society, but don't just take it from me, look around you. It seems that on an almost daily basis, there are reports in social media news feeds or mainstream media about secret facts contained in government records that a reporter got in response to an ATI FOI request, or that there was a privacy breach by someone who used their access to an IT system to obtain personal files. What do these news reports that you see occasionally in the paper, rather more frequently lately, they range from illegal deletions of government records to personal information that was exposed in computer systems. In fact, we just had one here in Nova Scotia the other day where someone had gone in and accessed about 60 files just seemingly out of curiosity and made the news. Well, your job may not be to respond to these potential scenarios I described above. As a local government's public servant or politician, you will inevitably connect at some point in your career with some of these situations. That's why it's important to understand what your role is in IAP. And you do have a role whether you realize it or not, because you're part of a team in your local government that has to address issues that arise out of these situations. And it's necessary for you to understand what the role is. It's also important fulfilling that role to know the principles and rules that guide you on the right way of doing things. To get you started in the first module of the course, it starts out by giving you the background and evolution of information access and privacy as a hallmark of democratic societies. It describes the yin of access pulling in one direction and the yang of privacy pulling in the opposite direction. Later modules deal with the practical and legal rights and challenges in dealing with IAP issues. I should note that as we get to later modules of the course, you will get a greater sense of emerging IAP trends and such things as processing fees on ATI or FOI requests, and notice requirements when there's a privacy breach. As well, there have been recent new privacy laws proposed by the governments of Quebec, Ontario, and the federal government for the private sector and the digital economy. What long-term effect will these have on how local governments go about their business? The existing IAP challenges and these emerging trends will be factored into the dashboard and essay assignments that you'll be presented as part of the course. They'll give you a chance to hone your problem-solving skills in dealing with IAP situation. As well, if anyone is interested, we can try to set up Zoom meetings or chat rooms where we can discuss any issues that you're having with the course. I'm also hopeful that we'll be able to include videos of practical advice from current and former information and privacy commissioners and prominent practitioners in the field. As I said earlier, you may not have direct responsibilities for information access and privacy in your position, but you will likely be part of local government project management teams that have to make decisions on issues that will have ramifications on either information access and privacy. In short, you will need to know what the information access and privacy ramifications are in all the decisions you make on which you participate. So let me be clear that my objective with this course in a nutshell is to ensure that you understand what the IAP principles and rules are, to participate and to make those decisions with issues on projects with IAP ramifications. Let me say again as well that if you're a local government politician, municipal corporation board or chair or CEO, or a local government public servant, or you're just only loosely connected with a local government, whether you're in Nunavut or in Nova Scotia, a general understanding of the principles of legislation on information access and privacy and how they should be applied to given situations will serve you well in the future. So in a nutshell, what are the takeaways from the course? First, an understanding of the legislative rules governing access to information and freedom of information requests. You will not be expected to be able to step in and process FOI and ATI applications for records with specific information when you completed the course, but you will know what the key points are in processing the application, important timelines, notice requirements, and et cetera. And you'll come away with a basic understanding of the exemptions to disclosure of records with respect to information in those records. The term we used to hear within the government was, are those records FOIP-able? And the answer is, the Act applies unless there are exceptions to all the records that you hold in your municipality or local government. Now, there are exceptions to that, like court documents and things of that nature, but that's generally the rule. So then you're looking at what are your disclosure obligations under the legislation at the end. You'll also be able to get an understanding of how information privacy commissioners deal with appeals of local government ATI or FOI disclosure decisions. In the area of privacy protection, you will learn what the basic rules are in privacy protection laws and how they'll need to be applied. You'll also get an understanding of the key components of privacy legislation, which are collection, use, disclosure, retention, and security of personal information. It's simple and complicated. Those are the only 5 things that you'll need to understand what the basic application of those principles are. You'll also learn how to distinguish between local government confidential records and personal information that a local government holds in its files. Occasionally, you'll hear a politician say, well, we couldn't disclose this for privacy reasons. Well, in reality, privacy had nothing to do with it. It was just a record that they wanted to keep secret and confidential. So what will the time commitment be required to do the work necessary to complete this course? I know you'll be disappointed to hear that I'm going to say that it depends. It depends on how much you want to get out of the course. The course modules are about 20 to 30 pages, and you can probably read them in an hour or two. The dashboard problems are fairly short, as are the essay assignments, and in terms of the actual structure of the problem. Each dashboard requires a maximum of 150 or a maximum of 300 words and a minimum of 150 words for the initial posting and 100 words minimum for each subsequent posting. You're required to make 1 initial posting and 2 postings responding to what other students in the course provide in their initial and response postings. The essay assignments are posted on the word links with word links, the required word links noted. There was some flexibility on maximum word links. It's not very large. And there's virtually no flexibility on minimum word links in general. You would need to spend some time getting a sense of each module and reading it, and as well as the additional readings. And we hope that those readings will be interesting and give you a greater perspective on what the course provides. Your time on the dashboards and essay assignments should be very focused and dependent on how much analysis and research you do. I realize that you all have busy professional lives, and in most cases, busy lives after your working day. The secret is organization and focus. And to the degree that you are able to be organized and focused, this course should not be an excessive demand on your after work hours. So I should say as well here that when you'll be working with this course, you'll be dealing with the legislation. You won't be expected to know 12 pieces of legislation or 13 pieces of legislation across the country. When you're dealing with the problems, you would only be dealing with them in accordance with the legislation that's applicable in your own province. And that, of course, would be municipal government acts as well as your ATI or FOI, FOIP laws in their Freedom of Information Protection and Privacy laws. So join me for an exciting and enjoyable adventure exploring the field of information access and privacy protection and how it will affect your local government organization and your own work. And as I started out earlier in the middle of the discussion that we had today, you do have a role as part of a team that deals with FOI and protection of privacy. Many people think that responsibility lies only with the chief privacy officer or the chief information access coordinator, access to information coordinator. But you do have a role, whether it's in records that you hold, whether it's in decisions that you make, whether it's defining the sensitivity of the information and providing assistance to the people responsible for those who are involved in those ultimate decisions. I look forward to guiding you on this adventure and giving you some critical thinking skills for the issues that you may encounter in your work. Thanks for your attention. I look forward to many of you joining me in the course, and we can open it up now, I think, for questions, unless you've already received some, Mariana.
No, we hadn't received any questions in the chat. Thanks very much, Bob, and would welcome any questions. And particularly, maybe I'll ask people who are joining. Oh, we actually have a hand. Oh, The hand came up and the hand came down. Okay. But perhaps if people could just include in the chat how they currently work within information access and privacy. I'm sure, you know, Bob would welcome people's various experiences, or perhaps even share in the chat what brought you here today and what was of particular interest to you in this topic. So we'll just pause there for a minute, and we'll encourage you to add some comments here in the chat.
So maybe I could even start things off with a little bit. I do a lot of workshops with municipal staff, and I find that the people who are not directly involved in dealing with information access or freedom of information requests, or are not directly responsible for privacy protection, they come away with the light bulbs coming on in terms of how they can affect. And I find that probably what I enjoy most is seeing those light bulbs go on among those who are not directly involved in decision making about access requests or privacy protection. And I certainly enjoy providing tips, and I'm going to hopefully in the course lay out some outlines, because if you're in management in your local government, I think it's really important that you know whether your IAP, your information access and privacy regime, is functioning well. And because when it doesn't function well, it's a type of thing that frequently, and I hate to say this, but when it's done right, when it's done well, there's virtually no comments or no praises, and no flags go up as a result of it. When you have a problem and it gets into the news media, all of a sudden everybody becomes very conscious of their information access privacy regime. And that's what you want to avoid. You want to have a system, an approach, not a complicated one, of a system approach. That's what we hope that I hope that we can do in the courses, to give you that. And I think I've noticed in the past years when I've taught this course, that as we go along with each of the problems, that each time the honing of the problem-solving skills on information access and privacy issues, all of the students pretty much have good problem-solving skills. They're just not used to dealing with IAP issues. But by the middle of the course, I find that they're really quite, really improving to the point when they finish the course, I feel safe with them in terms of them looking after their IAP regime or even participating in it.
Bob, we do have just a question that was added to the Q&A here. And I'll read it here. It's from Ginger. So Ginger says, I'm an emergency coordinator, and the hazard risk assessment is treated very differently depending on what local government it is. Many are shy to approve the HRA, the hazard risk assessment, due to disclosure concerns, and then being liable for the hazards they are now disclosing. The opposite is vital, yet the federal government does not push this. Would it benefit the local government if they reference the overarching plans within their OCP? I'm not sure if I know that acronym, which is the official, I'll start that section again. Would it benefit the local government if they reference the overarching plans within their official community plan, which is the official marching orders for the community?
I think it would. You know, there was an issue here in Nova Scotia where the Water Commission, the Halifax Water Commission, just use this as an analogous situation. I'm not equating it with the situation that the attendee asked about. And they decided that they would not disclose where all the piping systems were in the municipality because they thought it was a security issue. So I understand both sides of that point, but the idea is at the end of it, you know, I use the term, generally speaking, on privacy, but it applies to access. What is the right thing to do to help betterment of society, or to keep people safe and learn from situations? And I'm a real believer that you can find a way to do that. May not be 100%, but it should be in a way that you should be able to get the vital information out that you need, or you want the certain individuals and organizations or levels of government to know, so that you won't have a dangerous situation in the future. And I think we're talking about safety here. I might be wrong.
There's another comment in here from Alexa in the chat, Bob. I work, and I'll read it aloud here. I work directly with the Freedom of Information Protection Coordinator, with the FOIPOP coordinator, and have been asked to deal with any FOIPOP inquiries that may come about, including processing FOIPOP requests or reviewing personal info in agenda packages. The coordinator is here for guidance and approvals, but I haven't had much formal training and is somewhat challenging at times. I find myself reading the FOIPOP manual or act a lot, it's in capital letters, but find there are often gray areas. I would be looking for hands-on experience in problem solving in terms of FOIPOP. Could you elaborate on the skills that I will learn for dealing with these types of inquiries for my municipality?
So generally speaking, and I say this from all my teaching experience as well as my work within government, is the first thing, and I'm sure your requester or person asking the questions knows how to obtain the records. If there's a problem obtaining records, that's another issue. But when the records come into the office and dealing with all the issues surrounding what's the right thing to do in terms of disclosure, what redactions would be in place or whatever, it's a process that, if you look at the experience in dealing with the various exemptions from disclosure, and you look at what the obligations are in terms of disclosure to be transparent and accountable that your legislation would require, the situations become, as you develop experience with it, become a little more obvious is not the right word, but a little easier to deal with. Personal information records are the toughest to deal with in any organization. They're very, very difficult in terms of protecting the privacy of individuals. In terms of the confidentiality of business information that would be requested, there's really, municipalities generally and local governments have generally been very open and transparent dealing with those issues. And the key is to deal with the individual request for records, but in the long term, to provide advice to the IAP coordinator in your organization, the person that you work with, to learn how to structure reports that you're open and accountable, and at the same time protect vital information that allows you to negotiate in the future and also retain your own trade secrets, etc. But just being secret is not really an excuse for the exemption to apply. And sometimes it takes some bold recommendations, and I've made them myself, in terms of what should be disclosed. And you'll see some of the stuff coming out where I can almost sense as I read the news report, the yin and the yang that went on within the organization about whether they would disclose it. So it's not an easy task to do, but over time, with the problems that I've constructed, I think they will go pretty much down the line of what your attendee who asked the question requested, in terms of contracts, in terms of privacy breaches, in terms of records that affect the economic interest of the municipality, and then also in terms of personal information on investigation reports. And I think we all have diversity policies and sexual harassment policies, and inevitably someone ends up having to write a report. How do you write that effectively? And if you haven't been able to speak to people who write it, at the end of the day, how do you redact that appropriately that you protect privacy and also provide the results of it? So I hope that helps a little bit, but I think through the problem-solving aspects of the course in the problems that we present, I think that each time it'll become a little bit easier to kind of, because the factors that have to go through your head when you're dealing with it, and it is all judgment. I'd be the first person to admit it. There's no certainty at the end of it. You make a judgment based on your good faith in terms of what you think the right thing to do is, and then you stand behind it. But hopefully the problems will help you do that.
That's great, Bob. And I think, that's a really great question. Thanks very much, Alexa, because, your response just, I think, emphasizes that, you need to get kind of the hands-on, you need to get in it to feel, it's almost like building confidence and comfort, living in the gray of and trusting your judgment. And that judgment is backed up by kind of having that foundational knowledge, but you really kind of have to test yourself in those circumstances to get a feel for it. So no, that was great. And we just have 1 minute left here. So I'll just welcome one final question if anyone has one that's burning. But I will also say that as Bob mentioned at the beginning, we will be resharing this recording of the webinar later today in an email follow-up to all of you, along with just a link to the course that Bob has mentioned, so you can review it in more detail and see if it's the right fit for you. And Bob, if you're willing, and certainly include Bob's contact information if you have any specific questions about the course. And so we can do that as well if that's something that you're open to, Bob. So
very much so, very much so.
Yeah.
In fact, I encourage. It's one of the great joys I have in teaching the course when I get questions like we just had.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's wonderful. Thank you all very much for joining us. Really appreciate you taking some time out of your day. And thanks as always, Bob. Thank you for presenting just some really good information about the course. And sorry, let me just actually just flag one comment here in the chat that came up, and then we can wrap up. But Lauren says here he's a little concerned. We intend to use a CRM, namely Salesforce. We also publish online and provide, upon request, the contact details for most of our local businesses and organizations. And he just has a comment of thanks at the end. But perhaps just wondering if you can maybe speak to those electronic houses, Bob, and appreciate if people have to run. We'll just address this question, then we'll wrap up. For those that do have to run, I will just encourage you to fill out a survey that you'll receive just before you officially sign off of Zoom, and we'd love to get your feedback. But now over to you, Bob. And they also just added, not sure if that is good practice, but seems to be the norm to have these kind of electronic houses for saving contact details for local businesses and organizations. Could you speak to that?
So the general conclusion across the country, with some exceptions, is that business contact information is not an invasion of the individual's privacy, because it's generally a matter of public record. It's like your business card information. There's been one case in Nova Scotia that decided that, somebody's signature at the bottom of a record, there was a privacy element to it, but that's generally the exception. And I think the current information the privacy commissioner here would not hold that as an invasion of privacy. So essentially it becomes, some legislation actually says this is a matter of public record. They go right out of the way to say that. And the legislation of our questioner might even say it in their own legislation, that it's not personal information, or it's not information that's applicable to legislation.
Right. Okay. All right. Wonderful. He says, thanks so much. So I'll just reinforce that, Bob. Thanks very much. And please keep your eyes out for an email later today with some of those details that I mentioned. And thanks very much again, Bob. I really appreciate your time. Take care, everyone. And we hope that you'll be able to join us for some future webinars that we have. So I'd encourage you to visit our calendar for upcoming webinars as well. Thanks again, Bob.
Thanks
Take
very
care,
much,
everyone.
Thanks very much, Mariana. See you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.